Stephen, what is the most important takeaway you want people to hear from this show today?
The most important takeaway that I want people to take away from this show is that in the absence of a rite of passage, boys are going to prove their manhood to themselves. And that's why it's every father's responsibility, because he is the primary example of what it means to be a man in a boy's life. It's every father's responsibility to tell his son at the appropriate age, son, I just want you to know, I no longer consider you to be a boy, but in my eyes, I see you as a man now. And that if every father in this country did that for their sons, then this country and this world would be a much better place, because boys would not need to prove their manhood to anybody else.
Here's the million-dollar question. How do men like us reach our full potential and grow into the men we dream of being while taking care of our responsibilities, working, being good husbands, fathers, and still take care of ourselves? That's the question, and this podcast will help you with those answers. My name is Brent, and welcome to the Fallible Man Podcast. Welcome to the Fallible Man Podcast, your home for all things man, husband, and father. Big shout out to the Fallible Nation. You guys make these podcasts possible, and a warm welcome to our first-time listeners. My name is Brent, and today my special guest is author, father, and advocate, Stephen Arms. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Brent, thank you so much for having me.
Now, Stephen, I'm not into big intros because I get to research you before the show, but accolades don't mean a lot of things to our listeners. So in your own words, today, in this moment, who is Stephen Arms right?
Absolutely. So my name is Stephen Arms. I am a husband and a father and a follower of Christ. I was born and raised in California. I spent the first 25 years of my life there, and then met my beautiful bride-to-be when I was 25 years old and moved up to Oregon to pursue my relationship with her. And we were married in 2018. And now we have two beautiful children. Our daughter is 3 years old and our son is 1, just about to turn 2 here. So we definitely have our hands full, but having children is a blessing. And I consider myself to be a very wealthy man in that regard.
Stephen, can I ask, what do you do for a living right now?
Professionally, I actually work as an engineer in the heating and air conditioning business.
Okay.
Yeah.
Engineering is a feat, man. It's a lot to that. So, wow.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, God gave me this, kind of technical mind. I'm always trying to think about how things work and how to take things apart. I've been like that ever since I was a kid. Legos were all I ever wanted from about 4 years old to probably 14 years old. Is if you just got me Legos for Christmas, I was a happy boy.
My daughters are getting more and more into Legos. I have to keep reminding them. It's like, okay, if I step on one, it's going in the trash. So mind your sets. They're starting to put together the pre-built sets that you see at the store.
Yeah.
And Lego is proud of those. Wow. Stephen, I like to get to know our guests. So tell us something just absurd you like to do.
Something absurd I like to do. I love to work out. So I actually kind of built out my garage into a gym, and I'm really into rowing and cycling. I have this machine. It's called a ski erg. Okay. So it mimics the cross-country skiing motion, really gets your core, your triceps. And actually last year, I set the world record in the 100 kilometers on the ski erg. It's about a 6.5 hour event, but I saw the record posted online and I was like, you know what? I think I could beat that. So one day I woke up at 5 a.m., was on the ski erg by 6 a.m. And then by about noon that day, I was a world record holder. My wife said, "You're crazy. I don't know why you do this kind of stuff." And I was like, well, I'm not going to argue with you. I am crazy, but I love that kind of stuff. I love pushing my body and trying to test the limits of what I can do physically.
Okay. Wow. That's very cool, man. World record holder. It's funny.
Thank you.
It's funny that people don't think about things like there's somebody who has a record in almost everything you do, right? We like to measure those accomplishments. So I never would have thought of doing it on the ski erg, and I've been on one of those once, and I really would not do 6 hours on it. You are crazy.
Yeah, I saw all the records for the shorter events, the 2,000 meters, the 5,000 meters, and it was like, I'm nowhere close to those times. But once you start getting out to the 100K, then a lot of people aren't interested in competing that anymore. So I was like, you know what? I think I can do this.
That's because that's a special brand of torture. That's
Yeah. Well, you said absurd, right? That's absurd.
that is. But that's a very cool fact. Steven, what purchase of $100 or less have you made in the last year that's had the most impact on your life?
Well, I'm going to stretch the limits. I actually just bought a new Garmin. It's kind of like a Fitbit watch. It was 150 bucks, but they do have a $99 model. So I could have got the cheaper one. But what I love about this is that it'll track your sleep. So it'll tell you, how many hours of REM sleep you got. And then it'll also track your resting heart rate. So if I'm going through a cold, or, if I've had COVID a couple times now, it'll show you, how your resting heart rate increases when you're sick. I love that kind of data, being able to track my heart rate and my sleep quality. So for me, that's been a really cool purchase that I've got in the last year.
It's like you have an engineering mind or something, data.
Weird.
So weird. I laugh. One of my best friends is I'm not even sure what the right word is. He's in a software engineer. And so like he lives on data, dude. Like he's got 3 watches strapped to him, and he's got things monitoring everything, and there is never too big of a data set. He'll data, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, engineers, I know these people. Yes.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Now, guys,
it's just how we're wired, man. It's just the way that God made us.
Guys, we're going to spend some time understanding what this conversation is really about as we get into rites of passage. But for a minute, I want to have a heart-to-heart with you guys and just share with you a little something special from our new sponsor. One thing I usually don't share is how impactful the podcast has been for me personally. There's a lot I love and appreciate because I have the podcast. I become somebody who can approach people easier. I have a better network of people to call upon when I need them. I get to meet new people all the time from all walks of life and all over the globe and connect with them at a deeper level. And I have a voice to do what I love. I'm always put into situations where I'm having to stretch and learn something new. I've really grown as a person and a professional since I started doing my podcast. And that was even before my show really started growing. I hired a company called Grow Your Show, who's our sponsor, by the way, and I wanted to share them with you. The owner, Adam, has one of the very best podcasts for teaching you how to be a podcaster. I honestly wish I had found it sooner. One thing that they've done to help me is to bring me to a much larger listener base so that my voice is being heard around the world. There's a good chance, in fact, that they helped us connect. But they also do editing and post-production. They can even help you launch and start your podcast, which could really help you in your business or whatever you're trying to achieve. So I just wanted to give them a quick shout out. I love to share great people and companies that I believe in that I use personally. So that's Grow Your Show at growyourshow.com. I have a link in the show notes. And if you have a podcast or you want to start a podcast or you're thinking about it, just scroll down there, click that link, and go work with my friend Adam. He's going to treat you right. All right, guys, thanks for bearing with us. I love Grow Your Show. Adam and his team are amazing. They are a company with incredible integrity. So thanks for listening, and check them out if you're interested in podcasting. Now, Steven, for people who aren't familiar with the term, what is a rite of passage?
So in our context, a rite of passage is an event that a boy can look back on in his life and know that was the moment that I became a man. When we look at other cultures, we see these rites of passage around the age of 13, these coming of age ceremonies. The most well-known is probably the Jewish bar mitzvah. That's the ceremony in the Jewish faith where a boy can achieve the status of man. Another example would be the walkabout in Aboriginal Australian society. And in that rite of passage, a boy is sent off into the wilderness for 3 to 6 months at a time to survive on his own. And when he comes back, he's no longer considered to be a boy, but he's considered to be a man of the tribe, and he's eligible for marriage. And modern Western society doesn't really have an equivalent coming of age event. And so that's one reason why our family in this book, we advocate for fathers to hold a rite of passage for their sons.
Okay. And guys, just so and I didn't throw it out there right at the beginning. We're actually going to be talking about Milestone to Manhood, and we're going to get deeper into the book as we go. But I just want to set the stage because you need to understand the core behind what this is, because the book is about a Christian rite of passage for 13-year-old boys. And it's incredible. It's a great blueprint. Like I said, we'll tell you more about it as we go, but we got to understand the basis of it. Stephen, why do you think we don't see rites of passage as a normal part of life as often in the Western and modern world?
That's a good question. I think that we don't have rites of passage today. I think it was a victim of the Industrial Revolution. And, don't get me wrong, there were a lot of good things that came from the Industrial Revolution. You and I are talking here on a computer one state away from each other. That's none of that would have been possible without the Industrial Revolution. But one downside of it was that it kind of broke up the nuclear family, right? So before, the whole family would work together on the farm, or the whole family would work together in the smith shop, right? That's why we have people with the last name of Smith, because their whole family were smiths. If your dad was a blacksmith, the son would become a blacksmith. But with the Industrial Revolution, boys were sent off to school, and dad was sent off to work in a factory. So there wasn't this as much time spent together as a nuclear family. And I think that's one reason why we don't see rites of passage today, was because we as parents, sometimes we tend to think, well, that's the school's job, right? To do that kind of stuff. But in reality, a school is never going to give your son a meaningful rite of passage that he can look back on and say, that was the moment that I became a man, right? So I think that's why we, as a society, don't have these rites of passage. And when you look at the societies that do have rites of passage, they're always these communities where the family is very strong, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's Aboriginal Australian society or tribes in Africa or in Brazil, it's these very tight-knit communities that are still practicing this tradition.
I was thinking about it a lot as I read through your book, and you guys did an excellent job. The book's very good. I was thinking about it because I live in a highly Hispanic culture where I live in Central Washington. Yeah. And so I started searching my brain. It's like, what do we? So young women in the Hispanic culture have a quinceañera at, I believe, 15. And it's the coming of age. And I grew up around the area with that. And so like the first time I went to one, I mean, talk about it is second only to a wedding. I mean, it is a spectacular event. And at the same time, my brain went, wow, I'm glad that's not my culture, because the price on that is insane. And I have 2 daughters. But I was thinking about it, right? Aside of a Jewish bar mitzvah or a quinceañera, you don't see it very often in modern Western culture. And so it was like, what are we missing by taking these things out that used to be much more commonplace?
I would say that the closest thing that we have in modern Western culture to a rite of passage is probably the Sweet 16. And there's a few reasons, and we talk about that in the book, but there's a few reasons why a Sweet 16 party is not an actual rite of passage. For a real rite of passage to occur, there has to be 3 elements. There has to be the separation of the boy outside of his normal support system. So he has to be removed from his regular day-to-day life. And then the second thing, there has to be a challenge, something for him to overcome, something for him to prove himself as a man. And then the third part is the reincorporation back into society. And typically there's, a big celebration, a party involved in it. And I would argue that a Sweet 16, it has the after party, the party element, but it doesn't have those first 2 elements. It doesn't have the withdrawing, pulling the boy out of his normal life. It doesn't have a challenge for him to overcome to prove himself as a man. So a Sweet 16 is not really a rite of passage. It's definitely not a meaningful rite of passage, because it doesn't give a boy an event that says that's when I became a man. What boy would say, oh, my Sweet 16 pool party was my rite of passage? It doesn't happen today.
So you penned this book with your father. How was that experience of doing this project together, guys?
So yeah, my dad and I wrote the book together. It was really wonderful. I've always had a really strong relationship with my dad. My dad obviously organized my rite of passage for me when I was 13 years old. And that was something that helped us to grow together. Writing the book, I think, helped us to grow even closer. One reason why we wanted to do it was because we wanted to have both the father's and the son's perspective. So my dad wrote about why he wanted to hold a rite of passage for all of his sons and how this tradition got started. And then I write about what my rite of passage weekend was like as a 13-year-old and some of the thoughts and the feelings going through my mind as my dad and my grandfather and my uncles were kind of sharing this advice about what it means to be a man, what it means to be a good man. So writing the book together was amazing.
Well, let's dive into a little bit of your dad's side here. Let's talk about the why behind why this started. Why did your dad feel the need to build this rite of passage idea?
So my dad actually grew up in a household without a father figure. My dad, between the ages of 5 years old and 17, he only visited his father 3 times. So my paternal grandfather, my dad's dad, was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis when my dad was 5 years old. And he actually separated from my grandmother and moved down to Mexico where he could afford 24-hour healthcare because it's a lot cheaper down there. Unfortunately, my dad, because of that, my dad really grew up without having a man in the house. And so when he grew up, he told himself, I want to give my kids what I didn't have growing up. I want to give my kids an example of a lifelong loving marriage. And I want to be a father who plays an active role in my son's lives. I don't want to be an absent father like my dad. So fast forward 20 years when my dad had, the 4 of us boys. I come from a family of 4 boys. And my older brother was turning 13 years old. And my dad wanted to do something special for his birthday to mark his entrance into manhood. My dad knew that the teenage years were not going to be easy and that teenage boys especially do crazy things. But he thought, if we can connect with the boy, if we can affirm his masculine identity and show how much he's loved in this family, then maybe he won't feel the need to try to prove himself and do these crazy stunts as a teenager. So my dad actually went to his father-in-law, my maternal grandfather, and he said, I want to do something special for my son's 13th birthday, but I'm not really sure what to do. And it was my maternal grandfather who said, well, in these other cultures, they have these rites of passage traditions. What if we came up with a Christian version of one of those? So that's really where they started to brainstorm. Well, what would that look like? What would a meaningful rite of passage look like for a Christian boy growing up in the early 2000s? And that's kind of how the weekend got started.
Okay. Now, you went through this process at 13. How did your own rite of passage really impact you for the better? Like in hindsight, looking back today, what difference do you think that made for you?
Yeah, so I had a rite of passage when I was 13 years old. It was a weekend trip that involved my dad, my grandfather, and 2 of my uncles. And I think the way that my rite of passage benefited me was really twofold. For one, growing up, I was really confident in my masculine identity. And I don't mean to say that, as a teenager, I had like huge biceps or a puffed up chest, like I was a man at 13 years old. What I do mean to say is that anytime someone outside of the family, whether it was a teacher or another parent, at Boy Scouts, anytime they kind of referred to me as a boy, like if the teacher of the class would say, boys, settle down, then immediately the first thought in my mind was, I'm not a boy, I'm a man because my dad told me, right? So I never questioned my status as a man. I never thought, when am I going to become a man? When is this going to kick in? And I didn't realize what a gift that was until probably my early 20s when I had a friend who was engaged and getting married. And I write about it in the book how we had this interaction where we were actually doing some chores. We were doing some handiwork around his house, some construction projects. And he kind of stopped me halfway through and he was like, Steve, when was the first time you considered yourself to be a man? And I I told him about this rite of passage weekend as a 13-year-old, and he was like, "Wow, that's incredible," And here he is engaged to an awesome woman, potentially having kids in the near future. He has a job. He has an awesome relationship with his parents, and he's still questioning his identity as a man. He's not sure if he's a man or he's a boy. And it was that conversation with my friend in my early 20s when I realized, wow, this rite of passage was a real gift for me to have this clear event in my mind that I can look back on and say, that's when manhood began for me. It wasn't prom night for me. It wasn't the day where my wife and I got married. It wasn't the birth of our daughter. For me, it was 13 years old when my dad and my grandfather told me that you are a man in this family. So I think the first way that it benefited me was I was always confident in my masculine identity. The second way that it benefited me was that growing up, I really felt like I could talk to my dad, my grandfather, and my uncles about anything. I felt very accepted and loved by this kind of tribe of men in my family. One thing that kind of gets said during the weekend inevitably is, from the men to the boy, they say, we love you unconditionally. If you ever have questions or are going through kind of a tough spot in life, please come to us for advice because we love you unconditionally. We have your best interests at heart. And more than likely, we've gone through whatever you're going through. We can help you. As a 13-year-old during my rite of passage weekend, I just kind of shook my head up and down and said, thanks. I didn't know what to make of it, but it really wasn't until I got into college where, I started meeting people who were raised very different than me, who had very different values than me. And that made me really question the way that I was raised and my own beliefs. And in college, I was really concerned. I started to question my belief in God, whether I believed in God or I wanted to practice the faith that my parents raised me in. And I remember being very nervous to talk to my parents about it because I wasn't sure how they would react if I told them, I'm not sure if I believe in God anymore. I didn't want to disappoint them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in college, I remembered back that 13-year-old rite of passage weekend and how all the men said, if you have questions, if you're going through a tough time in life, please come to us for advice. We won't judge you. We will love you unconditionally. We have your best interest at heart. And that gave me the confidence, the trust to go back to these guys, to go back to my dad, to go to my grandfather and say, Dad, Grandpa, I'm not sure if I believe in God. Why do you believe in God? And I think it was at that moment, for a lot of people, college is really kind of a make or break moment in your faith, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it certainly was for me. And hindsight is 2020, but I would say if it wasn't for this rite of passage weekend, there's a good chance that I would not be a practicing Christian today without it.
Okay. I love that it opened up the lines of communication in your family. That is a very difficult thing for young men to feel comfortable communicating with those in their family and drawing that line in the sand, because it really is, right? Your book had me thinking a lot. The wheels would just turning in my head like a hamster going nuts, man, as I was reading through the book. And it's like, wow, we have really just kind of failed our young men, because it is, right? There's all these different benchmarks of, well, at 18, you can smoke and join the military. At 17, you can join the military with your parents' permission. But at 21, you can drink and do this. But at 25, you can do this, right? We have all these different it's like, but none of that actually tells them or affirms you are now a valuable member of society. You are now a man. It's time for you to stand on your own feet, because you need that line in the sand too, right? We have too many 27-year-olds still living at home, sucking off of mom and dad because they were never told, hey, you're a man. It's time to take that next step on your own. So y'all's book got me thinking a lot. Let's talk.
Well,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say thank you. It's true that I think today in general, we're not raising boys to be like virtuously masculine men. And a big reason is that most men today have never been told by another man that you are a man and that manhood has begun. Manhood has probably begun a long time ago for most of these guys. And because they've never been told that they're a man, then they essentially act like boys into their 20s and into their 30s, like you were talking about. So that's kind of the beauty of a rite of passage, is that it gives the boy a clear moment that he can look back on and say, that was the moment, that was the weekend that I became a man, because that's when my dad told me that I was a man.
So let's talk milestone to manhood. This has become a full family event. I know, according to your book, the women in the family help you guys prepare and get things in order, and then help you celebrate also when you get home, right? They take part in recognizing that this young man has become a man. And that's an important part, is the young man gets that affirmation as well when he gets home, that this weekend has changed his status.
Mm-hmm.
How many times, you said you're one of 4 brothers, how many times have y'all done this now?
So, right, I'm one of 4 brothers. So me and my brothers, we all got these rite of passage weekends, and then my male cousins did as well. So I have 2 younger male cousins. So for me, I had a rite of passage weekend that was organized for me, but also once I became, an official man of the family, I was eligible to be one of those male mentors to go along the weekends. So I had a rite of passage for myself that I experienced as a 13-year-old, but I also attended 4 other rite of passage weekends for my 2 younger brothers and my 2 younger cousins. And I will say, I'll add in that the women of the family, the girls, did get a rite of passage weekend as well. So I don't have any sisters, but my girl cousins did get a rite of passage. So in total, there were 12 of these rite of passage weekends that we held as a family.
Yeah, y'all mentioned in the book that there might be a second book coming from the women's side of the family. I'm looking forward to that book as well, because I have 2 daughters. So I'm looking forward to that second edition, where the women in the family get focused on it and share that information, because I know, my wife is in the background saying, yes, please, we want that book. So you have at least a couple of people going, yes, please do the follow-up on, women, because I think we're lacking in this. I think there's a lot of validity to this. Now, what have you noticed just in the lives of young men outside of your family, maybe like family friends and stuff, as opposed to you, the way you guys were raised with this? What are the immediate differences that you guys can see, just contrasting? You said your family is different. That's something that you learned in college. I had that same experience. There was a point in my life where I started looking around at my friends' families and going, my family isn't normal the way because we're all very, very tight knit. My siblings are some of the closest people in the world to me, always have been, right? And I thought that was normal until I started hanging out with other people. But as you experience this, and you guys have friends outside of the immediate family whose kids weren't put through this process, what do you notice the immediate differences in those young people?
To be honest, it's tough to say, because I consider this rite of passage weekend to be a tool in the tool belt, right?
Mm-hmm.
The rite of passage weekend is not everything. I mean, as a father, you have to be a good example of what it means to be a man for your entire life, right? If you're objectively a bad example of a man, and then you hold one of these rite of passage weekends and are talking about virtuous manhood and what it means to be a man, then it really means nothing, right? So I consider this weekend to be just one way that a father can help to break through to his son, and to affirm him and to build him up. So I think that it's tough to compare because of that, because it is just one weekend.
Right.
But I will say that, in the absence of a rite of passage, boys feel the need to prove their manhood to themselves. And what that might look like, I would say, is the sexual conquest of women. So you hear guys saying things like, she made a man out of me, right? Guys trying to sleep around and sexually conquering women to prove their manhood to themselves. Or it could be violence, right? Joining a gang or getting into a fight. When boys are fighting, essentially they're trying to prove their manhood to themselves. They're saying, if I can physically dominate another man, then I'm a better man than him, right? So in that way, violence they're trying to prove their manhood to themselves. Or another, really common one would be video game addictions, right? In a lot of video games, you can literally go out and slay a dragon or kill a terrorist. That totally plays into the male ego of proving yourself as a warrior, proving yourself as a man. And I have nothing against video games, but I am against video game addictions. When you play video games to the point where you're getting your masculine identity, your identity is tied up to your video game character, then I think something has gone wrong. So in the absence of a rite of passage, boys will try to prove their manhood to themselves. And I think that was the difference for me having this weekend, is that I had this weekend where my dad, my grandfather, my uncles told me, you are a man of this family. So as a teenager, I didn't feel like I had to prove my manhood to anybody else, right? So I think that's probably the biggest difference between what our family did and other families who don't have this rite of passage for their kids.
Okay. I was asking just because you throw out the example of your friend at his wedding, right? Having to ask that question, that in his head, apparently that was still a question and something he was still playing with. So I was wondering if you had noticed any other areas where it's like, oh, this really divided this.
Yeah.
Now, guys, we're going to roll to one of our sponsors, and we will be right back with more from Stephen Arms. How well do you sleep at night? Do you toss and turn and wake up more tired than when you went to bed? Sleep is commonly one of the critical elements people fall short on in their life. The quality of sleep you get directly affects your ability to control your weight, your ability to add muscle, your stress levels, and your everyday job and life performance. If you're ready to move to the next level, then sleep has to be part of the plan. Check out our friends at ghostbed.com if you're ready to get your best sleep. I love my ghost bed. I've been sleeping on one for a couple years, and it's made a huge difference in how I sleep. Hit ghostbed.com and use the code TheFallibleMan30 to get 30% off your order and start getting better night's sleep tomorrow. Now, let's go on to the show. Hey, welcome back. We're here with Stephen Arms discussing, is the Christian rite of passage a good idea for boys? Now, if you've missed the first part of the conversation, you absolutely have to go back through because we've covered a lot of ground and a lot of details. Stephen and his family have had this personal experience that they're sharing with the world. Now, guys, the book is Milestone to Manhood, and we will have links, of course, to get that book into the website so you can check that out. We want you to be able to find this book. Personally, I love the book. It was a great read, and man, it just got my head spinning. But I don't want to go into too much detail about the book because I'd love for you to read it, because until you actually go through it, like, I'm not going to do it justice. But I wanted to touch on a couple of things in the book, especially towards the end. So, Stephen, how is life with your newly christened man post-weekend? How does that change? It was an interesting transition in the book because life has to change, right? You can't say, you're a man, and then go back home and life is the same. So how does that look?
Absolutely. So there kind of has to be a balanced approach for life after the weekend. Ultimately, this new man is still a 13-year-old, so obviously it would not be appropriate to kick him out of the house, tell him to go get an apartment and a full-time. It has to be a gradual approach, how you treat him as a man. But it is important to treat him differently after his rite of passage weekend. Certainly increasing responsibilities around the house is a good way to do that. I know for me and for my brothers, 13 years old was right around the time where we were physically big enough to push the lawnmower around. So that became one of our chores. And, inevitably, whenever you increase the responsibilities, the chores for your kids, there's always going to be some resistance, right? They're not going to like it. But having this rite of passage weekend gives fathers context to have those discussions with their sons, why increasing their responsibility is a good thing. So dads don't have to say something like, you need to mow the lawn now because I say so, right? That's just kind of a flex on your authority over him. But if you say something like, we want you to mow the lawn now because when you grow up, when you get married and have a family of your own, you're going to have to mow the lawn because I'm not going to be there for you. So it's really a good thing for you to learn how to do this now rather than learning in your 20s or in your 30s. Another really cool way that the boy was treated differently after his rite of passage weekend in our family, whenever we gathered together for holidays, whether it was Christmas or Easter, it was always a fairly large gathering. And so there were always two tables. There was an adult table in one room and then a kids table in another. But once a boy or a girl went through one of these rite of passage weekends, they kind of graduated from the kids table into the adults table, and they were, instead of having the conversation with the kids, they were engaged in conversation with the adults and whatever they were talking about over dinner. So that was one really cool kind of physical way to show, you are no longer a boy or a girl, you've graduated to manhood or to womanhood.
Now, you guys have put together this, because I'm going to call the book more of a blueprint, right? You answered the whys, but then you laid out a very structured approach that y'all have found has been very effective for you. How does that translate to another father picking up this book? How is the best way to apply this book?
Yeah, so we realized, our family having organized 12 of these rite of passage weekends before, we've really accumulated a lot of best practices, a lot of tribal knowledge, how to pull one of these weekends off. So the book is really a how-to guide for fathers who want to organize a rite of passage weekend for their own sons. And in that way, it's very much plug and play, right? We give you the exact steps, step by steps, the rituals that we went through in our rite of passage weekends. And, certainly we would love it if a father wanted to just adopt it straight out of the book and use all 7 of the same rituals. But we also give guidance on how you might want to modify it for your own family. If you have family traditions in your own family that you want to add into the weekend, we absolutely would encourage you to add it into the weekend and to make it your own. One thing I'd like to add for your audience is that on our website, milestonetomanhood.com, we've actually put up some email templates for fathers to access. So if you're listening to this and you have an 11 or 12-year-old son and you want to organize a rite of passage for him, you can just go to our website. There's a planning section and there's 5 steps. You can literally go to it, copy the text from the website and paste it into the body of an email for the men who you want to invite to go onto your rite of passage weekend with you and your son. And this weekend, this email explains what a rite of passage is, why you want to hold one for your son, and exactly the step-by-steps of the rite of passage weekend that our family did for the boys and girls. So, we realized, we have all this information. Why not give it to listeners for free so that they can organize a rite of passage as easy as possible? One of the hardest parts is just explaining to people what a rite of passage is and why you want to do it. So we realized, why don't we just give that to our listeners for free? We don't ask for your email address because we know, a lot of guys don't want to be spammed these days. I totally get it. I don't want to either. So you literally just go to the website, copy these emails and paste them into the body of an email to send to your team.
Okay, that's awesome. I love that you guys leave room for customization, right? You had some really great ideas, but the fact that you leave room in there, say, hey, this is what's been good for us, but tweak this for your experience as a family. It's just incredible. Now, Stephen, there are some guys out there right now who are listening who are like, is this right for me? What are 3 questions our listeners should ask themselves to decide if this is something they should implement with their sons?
I would say if you're on the fence, if you're a father on the fence thinking about whether you want to organize one of these weekends for your son or not, ultimately, you're not doing this for yourself, you're doing this for your son, right? And the truth is that not all of the responsibility is going to fall on your shoulders, because you are going to get other men involved to help to break through to, certainly dads are the most important male role model in a boy's life. But around the age of 13, there's also this tension that develops between father and son, right? The boy doesn't necessarily want to listen to dad all the time. So that's really the beauty of getting other men involved, other men who are not his father. So I would say, for one, you're not doing this for yourself, you're doing this for your son. Number 2 is you're going to get a team of men involved. And 3, really the benefit of it is that you are, by affirming your son's masculine identity, you are showing him that he does not have to prove his manhood to himself, right? Through rebelling, through doing dangerous stunts. And so that's what the benefit of the weekend for your son is, that you're giving him a clear moment that he can look back on and say, that was the weekend when I became a man in my father's eyes.
Stephen, what is the most important takeaway you want people to hear from this show today?
The most important takeaway that I want people to take away from this show is that in the absence of a rite of passage, boys are going to prove their manhood to themselves. And that's why it's every father's responsibility, because he is the primary example of what it means to be a man in a boy's life. It's every father's responsibility to tell his son at the appropriate age, son, I just want you to know, I no longer consider you to be a boy, but in my eyes, I see you as a man now. And that if every father in this country did that for their sons, then this country and this world would be a much better place, because boys would not need to prove their manhood to anybody else.
What's next for Stephen Arm?
That's a great question. What's next for me? My wife and I are expecting our third child this year. So that's definitely the biggest things. Thank you. That's definitely the biggest thing on our minds. That, and just getting this idea of a rite of passage out into the world, sharing it with other families so that they can benefit from the weekend in the same way that ours has.
All right. And guys, I will have a link to their website in the show notes and in the description, so you can find the book, so you can go find those letters. We'll make sure you guys are hooked up with Milestone to manhood.com. Also, if you go to our bookshelf on our library on the website, you'll find a link to their book. If you are interested in getting this book as well, you can get it on their site. You can get it on Amazon, whatever is good for you guys. And that link will stay up there, because I think this book has a lot of value. If you are a father looking and working on setting an example, and I'm assuming you are because you're listening to this show, right? And this is what we're all about here. So if this is what something you're looking for, I wholeheartedly recommend pick up a copy of this. I'm actually loaning my copy to people. I'm like making a list of people I'm handing it to now that I'm done with it. Guys, I would highly encourage you to pick this up and consider this, whether you have boys or whether you have girls, because until we get the book for girls, you can actually change a lot of this over. And ladies, you can pick it up too, because we have a lot of ladies that listen to this show, and get the baseline for how you can do this with your daughters as well. Guys, give it a try. Trust me, there are books you need to read. You should read this one. Stephen, thank you for taking the time to be here with us today and to share with our audience. It's great having you on. Guys, as always, be better tomorrow because of what you do today, and we'll see you on the next one.
This has been the Fallible Man Podcast, your home for everything man, husband, and father. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a show. Head over to www.thefallibleman.com for more content and get your own Fallible Man gear.